A little bit uncomfortable up here at the stage to sit here alone. We definitely were expecting a very esteemed and dear friend of Kazakhstan to be here, but due to the unforeseen circumstances, she could not be here with us. But nevertheless, dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome you all to this high-level special session. We have the privilege of engaging in a dialogue with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization. I would like to express our deep appreciation to Dr. Okonjo-Iweala for accepting President Tokayev's invitation and joining us here in Astana, although through a video call, for this important discussion. I would also like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the delegation of our brotherly nations, acceding countries from Central Asia. I would like to especially welcome Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Trade, Serik Jumangarin, and Ambassador Ajanova here as well. And of course, each and every one of you gathered here today. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the world is becoming increasingly polarized. In addition to trade restrictions, crawling protectionism, tension between major powers are rising. We are confronted with the pressing issues of food insecurity, climate change, and rising cost of living. It is crucial that we come together to restore trust and find solutions that benefit all. I believe that the Astana International Forum, which brought together global leaders from various sectors, has provided a very convenient platform for open and constructive discussions. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, your insights and perspectives on the future of the multilateral trading system will definitely make a profound contribution to the agenda and objectives of the forum and beyond. I again extend a warm welcome to you, and I look forward to your engaging conversation. Now let us delve into the topics at hand. Director General, the multilateral trading system faces various challenges in today's complex global environment. One of the key challenges is the rise of protectionism. This threatens to undermine the very principles of free and fair trade. Additionally, the digital economy presents new challenges in terms of regulatory frameworks and intellectual property rights. We must also address the disparities in development of the WTO member countries, and we have to ensure that the benefits of trade are available to all of them. In light of the challenges faced by the multilateral trading system, could you kindly shed light on some of the major challenges and how the WTO is working to tackle them? Director General, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Once again, we welcome you.
Well, let me thank you. Well, let me thank you, Your Excellency. I want to check if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be with you again. And I want to start by saying how wonderful the government of Kazakhstan is. You performed extremely well with the chairmanship of the 12th Ministerial, and you, Your Excellency, you were leading the charge. So we're very grateful to Mr. President, to you and to the entire government for the role you played at MC12, which was a very constructive one. I'm also grateful for the invitation that you tendered to me to attend this occasion. And I am so sorry I couldn't be there in person. I tried, but you know, the flight was canceled or late and we missed the connection. But we do have a delegation there with you. So let me turn to the questions, the question that you posed about the challenges facing the multilateral trading system. And I would like to answer perhaps with 2 or 3 points. This is a very uncertain time in the world. The world economy is growing slowly. There's very serious geopolitical tensions. We have problems of the global commons like climate change. We have the war in Ukraine. So there are a number of uncertainties that are facing the global trading system. But I think one of the biggest challenges we're facing at the moment has to do with the issue of the geopolitical tensions that we're living be it the tensions between China and the United States or between Russia and Ukraine, and there are also other tensions. And these tensions, we live them daily at the WTO, and we have to find a way to manage them so we can do our work. But these tensions are leading to a situation where people talk about decoupling, deglobalization, and there's a risk of fragmentation of the global trading system. And I think that this is really a very important challenge, if not the most important challenge that the multilateral trading system faces today. And when we talk about, or we hear talk about decoupling, all of this arising from the serious vulnerabilities in supply chains and the trading system that we saw during the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, when people talk of decoupling, we have to say, let's be very cautious. Let's be cautious because if the world trading system fragments, that could be very costly for the entire global economy. WTO economists have estimated that if the world were to break into two trading blocks, perhaps one block behind the US and EU, another block behind China, for instance, just to take an example, it would mean a 5% loss in real global GDP in the longer term. 5% loss. This is bigger than the loss that the OECD countries faced during the financial crisis of 2008-2009, which was 3.5% of GDP. It's like saying that you lose the entire economy of Japan from the global economy. So this is serious, and it is not something we should contemplate. The IMF has done similar work and come up with an estimate of 7%. But even more troubling is the fact that emerging markets and developing economies would suffer an even bigger loss, double-digit losses, which would be devastating to these economies. So this is a big challenge, and that is why we've done so much work to say, look, we cannot contemplate decoupling, we cannot contemplate fragmentation of the multilateral trading system. We must find a way to stay together because of the costs involved. So that's the big challenge we face. I think as a result of all this and the evidence we've been able to put on the table along with other international organizations, there is now more talk of de-risking, which is fine. There are risks in the multilateral trading system. We saw the concentration of production of certain goods or certain sectors. We have semiconductors, we have rare earths, minerals, we have even vaccines where 10 countries in the world export 80% of all vaccines, which is too concentrated when you have a pandemic. So we do have some of these vulnerabilities, and it is okay to say, how do we build global resilience? How do we diversify our supply chains? That is fine if that is what we're doing with de-risking. So this is the bigger first challenge. And I'm very happy that the countries of the G7 in the recent G7 meeting, at which I was present, are saying that no, we are not talking about decoupling. We are talking about de-risking and building resilience in the global economy, which I think is fine. So that will really be helpful. So that's one set of challenges. And I'll come back because I want to talk about opportunities too, not just challenges. Another challenge which you mentioned is the challenge in the digital economy. And I think this is really important, but we see it more as an opportunity at the WTO. If we look at what is happening with trade, the fastest growing segments of trade is services, and within it, digitally delivered services trade, which is growing at 8% per year compared to goods trade that is growing at 5.6% per year. So it is clear to us that I always say this, the future of trade is services, it is digital, it is green, and it should be inclusive. That's my mantra. So if digital is the future, then you're quite right that we need to look at what are the opportunities and obstacles within this. And I think that part of what you refer to is if we are going to have digital services trade, then we must have the regulatory framework in countries to be able to deal with it. We must have the global rules that underpin digital trade, just as we have global rules that underpin goods trade. We must now look to that. And the good news is that at the WTO, we've got about 90 of our members who are negotiating an e-commerce agreement. And it's a plurilateral agreement, meaning that plurilateral agreements are one of the instruments we have where a large number of members come together, like-minded members, to try and negotiate an agreement, which will be open to other members to join when they are ready. So we have this going on, and when we finish with this, perhaps in a year's time, we will have the rules that underpin digital trade. And this will mean that we will assure stability, fairness, and competition within the digital trading arena. It's going to be quite a difficult agreement to complete because we've got different views on the issue of cross-border data flows, privacy issues, how you govern all of that. In addition, like you said, Your Excellency, countries have to look at their regulatory systems. Is your regulatory system in place? And many countries have not done this. How strong is it? So these are challenges, but I think they are good challenges. You know, you have challenges that are very difficult. I consider challenges for digital trade good challenges because they're facing what the future of trade will be. And I hope that at the WTO, we can work with other organizations like the World Bank to help to tackle or take care of these challenges. Let me also touch on the issue of protectionism, which you mentioned. Yes, the uncertainties and the vulnerabilities we are seeing in the global system are leading countries perhaps to take more protectionist measures. But we do not believe at the WTO that this is the way to go. As you know, we stand for competition within the multilateral trading system. So we are urging countries that the way to go is not to retreat from trade and look inwards and become more protectionist, but to maintain the stability and openness of the global trading system. It has delivered benefits for the past 75 years. It's lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. You just looked at a video where it showed how beneficial it has been to Kazakhstan and will be to other Central Asian countries when they accede. Therefore, we need to keep this system open, competitive, and not to retreat into protectionism. Now, I'll end this segment by saying that, look, rather than becoming protectionist, we should look at how we tackle the vulnerabilities in the present system and guard against them. One of the things we could do is when we think that supply chains are weak, when we think that there's over-concentration of manufacturing or products in certain sectors, building resilience does not mean just situating, just diversifying to your friends and neighbors. It means looking globally to see where is there a proper business, friendly business environment, and how do we diversify these manufacturing supply chains to these areas? How do we diversify the procurement and processing of rare earth minerals to more of these countries? I think that's the way we should be looking at it. Those countries that have been left out of globalization, the first wave, we should use this opportunity of trying to build resilience to bring them into the global trading system by situating activities and diversifying supply chains into these countries. So rather than looking at protectionism, we should look at inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General. I think very good points. And I totally agree with you that probably it is the most intense period after the World War II where the geopolitical tensions affect economies and trade. I've heard a very good point that de-risking versus decoupling. I think it's a very fine balance, and we need to work towards okay, de-risking is fine, decoupling is not. The very good point that you've made is that according to your research and IMF's also, the emerging countries, the countries in transit, are the ones that stand to lose most if we do if the world goes ahead with regionalism over regionalism and decoupling. So I think for the countries like us and the countries like Central Asia, it's very important that we do keep the multilateral trading system open to all. On the services and digital, I think you've nailed it. That's right, because services represent the biggest share of GDP of pretty much any country nowadays, and they're becoming more and more tradable. And digital is the area, the one area which is growing the most. And unless we unlock their potential, it is very difficult to expect the overall growth. So I think we should commend the work that you're doing with respect to e-commerce and the plurilateral working group and agreement that hopefully all of us can join in the future. And on the protectionism versus fair competition, it is also very, I think, enlightening that organizations such as WTO understands the challenges that developing economies sometimes face when they're out there competing with the bigger ones. So your work with the World Bank that you've mentioned, and I think other sponsors such as Asian Bank, EBRD, and others, is very important for capacity building, for closing gaps in competition within the countries, so that they are ready to go out there and compete globally. So thank you very much. I think it was very insightful. The next topic is the MC12 decisions. The recent ministerial conference played a crucial role in the shaping of the future of the multilateral trading system. We have mentioned that already. And I think due to very good will and very diligent work, members managed to deliver an unprecedented number of multilateral outcomes during the conference. And we personally had a very great honor to chair the conference. And once again, on behalf of our country, we would like to thank you personally, your team, the whole Secretariat, the whole WTO team, for the excellent coordination, leadership, and drive during the MC12. Now, Director General, could you highlight some of the key outcomes of the conference and explain to wider audience how they contribute to the stability of the system and the economy of the world? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. And it was a singular honor to work with you to deliver the results and with all the members. And I must say it was not an easy set of multilateral negotiations that we had. If you recall, there were a number of postponements of MC12 due to the pandemic. But finally, we got there, and it was held in Geneva in June 12th of last year, and chaired so ably by Kazakhstan. So what were the outcomes? I think when we started out, we were not expecting to be as successful as we were. So like you said, all members must be commended for doing the hard work that led to several agreements. We are proud of the successes, although we must not rest on our laurels. We reached some agreements that are very vital, I think, to solving the problems of the global commons. So let me start with the first one. The first was reaching an agreement on doing away with harmful fishery subsidies that are aiding and abetting illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing of the high seas and depleting our oceans. And I think that was a landmark agreement. This, you would not, most people would not know, but this particular agreement has been being negotiated for over 2 decades with no breakthrough. More than 20 years, WTO members have been trying to reach an agreement on curbing harmful fishery subsidies. We finally did it. So this will do away with $22 billion in harmful subsidies. If you look at the numbers, in 1970, 7% of our oceans were 7% overfished. By now, it's, according to FAO numbers, 38% overfished, almost 40%. But there are other estimates. For instance, from the Minderoo Foundation in Australia, an NGO, that show we are closer to 50% overfished. What does this mean? It means that the 260 million people who depend on fisheries for a livelihood in the world are at risk of having their livelihood jeopardized by this overfishing of our oceans. So by reaching this agreement of doing away with $22 billion in harmful fisheries subsidies, it means we're contributing to the sustainability of our fisheries and our oceans. And so we're very proud. This is the first time the WTO has delivered an agreement on sustainability. And by the way, it takes care of Sustainable Development Goal 14.6, which the United Nations Secretary General had assigned to the WTO to deliver. So that was a proud moment to say that our members were able to reach agreement on.
Связь проверим, да?
Let's check the connection.
Прошу организаторов проверить связь и перепутать.
We kindly ask the organizers to check the connection and maybe reconnect.
Please enter the meeting passcode, followed by the pound sign.
We can see you, Director General.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, it appeared that the connection dropped, but I think it's been restored. Thank you so much. I was talking about the fishery subsidies agreement and saying that it normally takes a long time to ratify an agreement at the WTO, and this time we can't afford to do that because of the sustainability issues. So what we are hoping is to bring this agreement rapidly into force, because it's only when 2/3 of our members have ratified it that it actually comes into being. And if we are serious about saving the oceans and the fisheries, we need to be fast. So the objective that we're putting is to have this ratified in 18 months. I hope we can do it so that by MC13, it will be ratified. And I know Kazakhstan, for instance, is working really hard. Ambassador Jana told us you've started your process and hopefully you'll be able to ratify the agreement. We just had the EU ratify a couple of days ago, and we now have over 30 countries that have done that. So we are pushing. Now, the other agreement that is very important, I'm also quite proud of, because it responds to the problems of the day. We have big problems of food security. Food prices are high everywhere in the world, not only high, but volatile. Although they've been coming down lately, according to the FAO Food Price Index, we find that levels are still much higher than they were pre-pandemic. And many poor people in countries all over the world are suffering. There are still 350 million people who go hungry and who the World Food Program has to feed. So the issue is, how do we support the humanitarian efforts of the World Food Program? And the World Food Program had requested about a decade ago that WTO members remove any export restrictions that might get in its way of acquiring food for the hungry all over the world. I'm happy to say that WTO members came to an agreement to do that there would be no export restrictions inhibiting WFP from purchasing food items to feed the hungry all over the world. So this is a major contribution to humanitarian efforts. I had a conversation with the new WFP Executive Director, Her Excellency Mrs. Cindy McCain, a couple of weeks ago, and she reassured me that so far they're not encountering any problems. So our members are keeping to their word. There was also a strong declaration by members saying they would try to lower other export restrictions that might get in the way of food prices and food price volatility, and inhibit the world trade in food, feed, and fertilizer, because fertilizer trade is equally important. And we established a monitoring system. Since the war began, the war in Ukraine began, we've seen 100 export restrictions put in by WTO members. I'm happy to say they are phasing them out, and we are now down to 63, still not good enough in my judgment, but at least it's moving in the right direction. Members have also put in export facilitation measures. So that was another major block, responding to the issue of food security in our world. Let me mention a third one, which has to do with digital trade and the digital economy. For many, many years now at the WTO, there has been a moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmissions, which speaks to not trying to charge customs duties for digitally traded items, digitally delivered electronic services. And the private sector has felt that this is one of the most important accomplishments of the WTO because it does, they feel that it does give the room for the digital economy to grow. And so there was an agreement to extend that moratorium. It was not made permanent, but it was extended. And again, given the diverse views among members as to whether this moratorium really serves the interests of developing country members versus developed, it was good that members could come together to have this agreement. So that was another achievement. Let me come to one really critical one that I think WTO members should be proud of, and that was the TRIPS waiver. If you recall, during the pandemic, there was a huge push to do something about the accessibility of vaccines to developing countries, because many countries were on the queue to receive these vaccines, and they didn't receive them on time. So it is not acceptable that we have a world where you actually have a cure for a disease or a pandemic, and then there are people in the world or countries sitting at the back of the queue waiting for the vaccines. So developing countries had demanded the right to override patents for a temporary period so that they can manufacture these vaccines in their countries. And that had become a very difficult point of negotiations at the WTO. And at the time I arrived, they had been discussing this for 18 months with no breakthrough. So we were able to make a breakthrough, and members were able to come to an agreement to allow a waiver of the TRIPS and allow overriding of this patent for a period of 5 years, so that developing countries who want to manufacture can do that. And this, again, was, I think, a great achievement of the members of the WTO, responding to a challenging issue of the time. So I think these were really significant issues that, that the organization took on board and found solutions. That is what the WTO should be doing. It should be in the business of looking at the issues that confront the world and saying, how can we be part of the solution? And I'm proud to say that members were able to rise to the occasion.
Thank you very much, Director General. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The members were able to rise to the occasion, especially at these difficult times. For the landlocked countries such as Kazakhstan, of course, fisheries subsidies is not something we understand here very well, but I think it really fits the global goal, because it's not only about sustainable development of the ocean, but it's also about millions and millions of people who depend on fisheries and the harm that excessive subsidies could make to them, to their living, to their everyday lives. And it is really fitting that and rewarding that we were able to overcome that long-standing problem. On food security, well, we clearly understand we see pretty high inflation throughout the region, and Kazakhstan especially, and countries tend to get selfish during these sort of times. And once again, I think the organization showed that sometimes we can't put together the common goals before the national ones, especially at the crisis times. And a very important one on digital trade, because I don't think we have a lot of youth here, a lot of people of younger generation. And for example, I don't think anyone just knows that it's not something that customs could be applied to digital services, and therefore making less accessible, more expensive. To us, it's free. And therefore, as delighted as we are in terms of extending the moratorium, I think the next one, we need to do away with that once and for all. But let's hope that the Abu Dhabi conference can help us with doing just that. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Excellency, could I just make one comment on?
Sure, the floor is yours.
On fisheries for Kazakhstan.
Sure.
I know you're a landlocked country, but looking at the latest statistics, Kazakhstan spent $100 million importing fish for consumption in the country. So perhaps it would be good for people to know that even though Kazakhstan is landlocked, you are importing this, and if we don't look at the sustainability of the oceans, those of you who like to eat fish might find you have less and less access. So it's also it's totally also pertinent.
That's right. That's right. Our eating habits are changing rapidly, and definitely fish is becoming more and more consumed in Kazakhstan. So hopefully we'll feel it ourselves here in Kazakhstan. Thank you very much once again, Director General. Well, the next topic is the long-awaited WTO reforms. And as a member, we believe that one of the key results of the conference was the launch of that very long-awaited reform process. We commend the unanimous ministerial decision on that important matter, and I think it was pivotal in adapting the organization to remain relevant in these difficult times. And of course, the reform process is not going to be easy, but it really holds immense significance. And to that end, Director General, we would like to hear your views on what do you think are the challenges ahead and how we should approach in terms of tackling them. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency. The WTO reform issues are of critical importance to all members. And if you listen to members and ministers, leaders, when they talk, one of the foremost challenges they see before the WTO, or tasks, I should say tasks, not challenge, is the reform of the organization. What does that mean? We want to see, we have three functions. We have the negotiating function, we have the monitoring function, monitoring and transparency function, and we also have the dispute settlement function. And they would like to see all those functions strengthened so that the WTO can be responsive to challenges of the 21st century. And you're absolutely right. There was an agreement at the ministerial, 12th ministerial, that we should really seriously begin this process of WTO reform. And I'm happy to say to Your Excellency that and the audience that this work has begun in earnest, and we are looking across at how to strengthen all our functions. Perhaps with respect to the negotiating functions, we do need to look at a variety of instruments, and though not all our members are agreed, we do have one instrument, the plurilateral, which is helping to energize negotiations at the WTO in the sense that new and emerging issues such as e-commerce, investment facilitation, and so on, members can come together, even if not all of them agree, but when there's a significant group of members, they can come together to negotiate an agreement. Leave it open for other members who are not ready to join when they can, and this becomes a new set of negotiations and a new instrument. So we are reinvigorating the negotiating function by looking at different ways to deliver new agreements that are pertinent to the times. Our monitoring and transparency function is also being strengthened. We are looking at a deliberative function. We want to expand the ability of WTO ministers to be able to engage on difficult issues and, build the ground perhaps for an agreement in the future in areas that are very pertinent now, but where there may not yet be a WTO agreement. What do I mean by that? We have issues of climate change and the environment. We want to find a way to create a deliberative forum, and I think we will start this at the 13th Ministerial, where WTO members can get together and speak about climate change and the impact of this on trade, which is can be quite significant. We've done a bit of work on that, and we see that climate change may change patterns of trade. We may find that because of climate change, areas that used to be bread baskets in the past, producing certain foods and crops, may no longer be because of droughts and floods. And that comparative advantage may shift to other areas. So how does that affect trade? Ministers need to be able, within our functions, to sit together to consider some of these issues. So that function is also being strengthened. Let me talk about the institutional, the way that some of our committees are working. These are areas where WTO members are talking of what is called reform by doing. They are taking steps to strengthen the way committees function, to make them more efficient, more able to deliver results faster for people. And then finally, the biggest reform area is the dispute settlement function, where you know that over a number of years, we have a two-tier system for dispute resolution. And the second tier had been paralyzed because we could not elect enough judges to make that second tier work. Well, WTO members agreed that now they will step up and reform that system. And it's critically important because if you don't have a well-functioning dispute settlement system, then there's really nowhere to bring those who contravene the rules of the organization. So this is the one place in the world where if you're a small country, it doesn't matter if you're 1 million people or 2,000 people, but you're a member of the WTO. If a bigger member with 100 million people does something against the rules, you can bring them to the dispute settlement system. So we're trying to reform that. We have pledged that by 2024, we will complete that reform. And we hope that by MC13, there will be a significant attempt to really deliver this reform. So that's where we are. We are moving. It's not easy. It entails a lot of hard work, but we are getting there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akonja-Iweala. I think it is very important. And as we were discussing at MC12, we were always told the mantra of the WTO being member-driven organization, which is obviously is the fact of life, and it's true. But of course, we need to remain relevant in the relevantly changing global environment. And to that end, of course, all three functions need to go through a very comprehensive reform. On climate and environment, I totally agree with you. And there needs to be a set of global rules related to their effect and regulatory effect on trade, because unilateral actions such as CBAM and other actions of the countries, as good intentions as they hold within them, they may have a negative effect on trade, and therefore the more universal we can make them, the more understandable and transparent and fair we can make them at the WTO, the better, so that everyone understands and acts in accordance. And on the dispute settlement, I totally agree with you. I think it's any rules-based system is as good as it can be implemented in practice, and therefore there should be a very strong, comprehensive system of making those rules, those decisions actually work in practice. So thank you very much once again for the very thorough overview of what is being done in respect of the reform process. The next topic is pretty much related to the previous one. It's the priority issues for the WTO members, because we understand that the priority issues on which the WTO members are working, there are a lot of them, and then they can be very varying. So our question is what they are, and what do you think we can do at the next ministerial? What is the level of the organization for the next MC13 in Abu Dhabi? What's your take on that, please?
Well, thank you, Your Excellency. We are grateful that the UAE will be hosting our next ministerial in Abu Dhabi, and I think all members are really working hard on these. And of course, listening to what the discussions in the General Council, the negotiations that are ongoing here. And I've also had the unique opportunity to be able to listen to ministers and leaders recently at several fora. As I said, I was at the G7, then after that I was at the APEC ministerial meeting in Detroit. Then I've just come from Paris, where we had the mini ministerial on the sidelines of the OECD. This has given unprecedented access to listen to what leaders, ministers, of course, ambassadors who are the representatives in Geneva are saying about priorities. So based on that, I can safely say that the topmost priority for members for MC13 is the reform of the dispute settlement system. In almost every gathering I've been, this is what has come top. So I hope we can work hard on that. We have an excellent chair we have a facilitator for these negotiations. The ambassador for Iceland, the ambassador for Guatemala is facilitating the negotiations for the dispute settlement system. It's in an informal stage now, but hopefully as members move along, this will be more formalized. We are grateful that the United States, that had several issues with this, is now working with all members to try to see what steps we can take to actually come to some concrete proposals that members can then negotiate. So that work is ongoing. It's not going to be easy, but I'm hopeful that we can have a solid package to deliver at MC13. So that's the top priority, but there are others. We've got the fisheries. I mentioned before that there's a second part of the fisheries negotiations, Fish 2, that we have to complete. Ambassador of Iceland is chairing the negotiations on that. We are just, it's in early days yet, but there have been a series of meetings here in Geneva, and some text is beginning to appear. And hopefully after the summer, there'll be the beginnings of concrete negotiations. I must tell you that a top priority is to get the ratification of Fish 1, the first phase of fisheries, by MC13. So I hope we can deliver that. Then quickly on other priorities, it is the moratorium that we spoke about on electronic transmissions. You've mentioned that we need to really come to some conclusion on how to deal with this instead of just looking at it year by year. And members are working hard. We have the ambassador of Mauritius that is facilitating the work program discussions. And we hope that, again, we can come up with some clarity and some facts that will enable members to make a decision on what to do with this at MC13. And then we've got the TRIPS. There has been a request to extend the TRIPS waiver, not only beyond vaccines to therapeutics and diagnostics. That is not moving as quickly as we would like. I think the United States is carrying out an investigation through its International Trade Commission to look at, talk to stakeholders. Other members are also consulting and talking to their stakeholders, and hopefully by October, we will be able to see some movement on that issue, but that is not moving as fast. And then I want to come to some areas where I think it's absolutely important that we do make some breakthroughs. You will see that we did not make a breakthrough on agriculture at the 12th ministerial. We were able to put forward some things on food security, some agreements, which I said I'm very proud of, and members should be proud of. But there are very deep issues in agriculture. You know, agriculture is so important to all countries, whether they are developed or developing. And yet, for the past 22 years, there's been no breakthrough on the agricultural negotiations. There are issues of trade distorting subsidies, harmful subsidies, that are anti-competitive, that members need to deal with. And these subsidies could be large. And if we don't do something about them, it means that perhaps smaller countries may not be able to compete, in order to produce the agricultural products, whether it's food products or commercial products that they would like to produce and export. So we do need to grapple with that. There are also issues of public stock holding. How do we treat the need and necessity for developing countries to be able to stock food or even develop? Or how do we handle this and make sure it does not lead to a situation in which there are also anti-competitive, distortive moves that prevent other members from competing in areas where these food stocks are being held. So we have issues of public stock holding. How do we use it to assure the security, especially of those large or poor countries who would like to participate in this kind of program? We have many other issues. I just mentioned two. There are issues of the cotton sector within agriculture, where we have the cotton fall. Some poor countries who are producing cottons who are not able to compete because of subsidization by other richer countries. How do we deal with this? So agriculture is really important, but the issues are so emotive that it's difficult to make breakthroughs. We are hoping that there will be a way in the 13th ministerial that we can deliver on agriculture issues. Now, that is a difficult one, and I cannot promise you that will happen, but we are working hard to try and see. Let me then mention development issues. Many developing countries and emerging markets would like to see the WTO members focus on issues that allow the developing countries to be able to industrialize, to be able to expand their economies, to be able to manufacture, create jobs. And they are looking at what are the things that need to be done on the trade side to enable this to happen. So there are several proposals by developing countries on this. They are called the G90 proposals. There are also proposals by least developed countries to help them when they graduate to have a transition period when they can still receive all the benefits of least developed countries. So these development issues, we need to also focus on and make some deliverables on that. So this gives you a flavor of the universe of agreements that we are looking towards. Now, let me end by saying that on some exciting new areas, there are also agreements that we think we can deliver. On the plurilateral side, there are 110 members or so who are negotiating an investment facilitation agreement. This is 2/3 of WTO members have come together and said, we need to do something to make investment in our countries easier. So they're negotiating an agreement to do away with all the barriers and bureaucracy in the way of investments. And we hope to be able to deliver this at MC13. So this is very important. So I hope that gives you an idea. It also gives you the amount of work we need to do to get all these things moving is enormous. But I'm proud to say that if you look at the issues we are negotiating on, there are issues that touch the lives of people. When you talk about agriculture, it's about people. How do they live? How do they produce? What do they eat? When you talk about fish, it's about people. When you talk about the digital agreement, you just mentioned that young people want to be able to create digital businesses. And we are trying to get an agreement that will enable them to do that. If you talk of extending trips, it's about how to make people healthy. So what am I trying to say? The WTO is relevant to doing things that change people's lives. And that is what we should be about, and that's what we're about. Thank you.
That's, I think, I could not agree more. But I see that we have our work cut out for us at MC13. And but one thing we can promise, I guess, that Fish 1 will be ratified by Kazakhstan by then. So one thing less we need to do. So and one thing that also provided some level of hope is that you've mentioned that the United States is working diligently on the reform of the dispute settlement mechanism. I think this is a very good news because the States used to be a champion. They are a champion of free trade, and that without their involvement, I think it will be very difficult to move the process along. So this is something to welcome and appreciate. The next topic, I think, very important for the audience, because as we have said, there are delegations from our countries, from our Central Asian countries that are still not members of the WTO, that are in the process of accession, and of course for them it is of specific importance because it integrates them further into global value chains, into the global trading system with all the benefits associated with that. So what is, in your view, what is the status for Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan? What do you think we can do collectively and maybe individually from Kazakhstan's point of view, being a recent member of WTO ourselves, to help them do it faster and more efficiently? Please.
Well, thank you. I was waiting for that question on accessions because I know it is so vital to you. Now, I waited because I wanted to say that one of the deliverables at MC13, we hope to have 2 accessions. I think for the past 5 years, we've not had any new accessions. So I'm happy to tell you that one of the exciting deliverables is the accessions of 2 countries, Comoros and Timor-Leste, who will become members of the WTO. And it's not so long ago that Kazakhstan acceded, and Kazakhstan has done exceedingly well in its participation at the WTO. As you said, it's chaired so many things, including the present chairing of the special session on services, which Ambassador Jana Ishtanova chairs very ably. But also, the Kazakhstan, I think, can really help us by encouraging and working with other Central Asian members on their own accessions. I wanted to mention the two accessions just to encourage the members who are preparing that, yes, it can happen, we're actually going to deliver to. So Uzbekistan is working extremely hard. I think it was 2 days ago that I had a very substantive meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister to go over what they're doing and how they're going to prepare themselves for the accession process. And they are now doing an outstanding job in that preparation. I must say, they've taken all the advice that they've been given. They formed the teams, the committees that they need to form. And I think we are going to see that accession process moving more rapidly, perhaps, than it had been in the past. Turkmenistan has also approached to say that it would like to work on its accession process. And we've been very eager to work with them. And again, they are trying to put the building blocks in place that will enable them to continue to work on that accession. And Azerbaijan, again, I met with the ambassador just a few days ago here in Geneva. They want to reinvigorate their accession process, which is being chaired by, I think, Turkey's the ambassador to Turkey is the chairman of the Working Party. So there's movement for the Central Asian countries on these accessions, and we are very eager. These are big countries. This is a part of the world that is very critical to the global economy, and we would like to see those members accede. I want to say one thing to the audience. Accession to the WTO also enables a country to do necessary reforms that will underpin the growth and development of that country. So it's not just we want to accede to the WTO, but getting there enables the country to do those reforms, fundamental reforms that can also accelerate the growth and development of the country's economy. And as His Excellency said, bring them into global and regional value chains. So it's like a double win when you do this process of acceding to the WTO. I know it's painful. It can take time. Sometimes we are working hard to see how we can limit the number of years it takes to accede. But I think we're in a good way for the Central Asian countries. And I'm very much looking forward to visiting the region and being able to engage on the ground with the leaders.
Thank you very much, Director General. I think it is very important because the Secretariat holds a very important role in terms of countries' accession. And on our part, of course, we are very eager to see Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan as members of the WTO. And we believe that it will provide a very good impetus for the regional integration as well in the region. We have our own FTAs, we have a long history of trading with each other, but I think being members of a global organization will help us even more. And you're absolutely right that for Kazakhstan, because we remember it's a pretty recent experience, a lot of reforms, a lot of difficult steps that we needed, measures that we needed to take internally, domestically, they were pushed in a way by the need to do them before the accession. So basically, it's a very good internal exercise as well. So once again, we stand ready both from Astana and from our embassy in Geneva to help our partners and brothers to join the organization. I think we've covered all the topics that we would like to, and I think the discussion was really lively, and you've provided a lot of information both on what has been achieved, what you're doing right now, and what you want to do in the years and months to come. I would like to once again thank you, Director General, for the your valuable, invaluable support of the Kazakhstan's chairmanship, your diligent everyday work of bringing the countries together with different views, sometimes polarized views. You're doing an excellent job together with your secretariat, the people that, whom all of us got to know very well, and I think you have a very, very able team, team of enthusiasts that are making the success more and more possible. I would like to assure the Kazakhstan views as multilateral trading system, rules-based system as the only alternative of developing global trade and economy for that matter as well. And we're strong supporters of the organization, we're strong supporters of the Secretariat, of your leadership, and anything that is related to our part of the world in terms of being leaders, being a push, you can count on us. And of course, we hope that sooner than later you will visit Kazakhstan and the region, so you get to meet with the wonderful people of Kazakhstan, the businesses, the commerce. You will see how we live here, and that will make you more aware, I'm sorry, of how this part of the world operates. And so once again, thank you very much, and I would like to pass the floor to you for your concluding statements.
Well, Excellency Suleimanov, I can only thank you for this interesting session and thank the audience for listening in. I want to thank His Excellency, Mr. President, the Prime Minister, Ambassador Jana Ashkanova, your ambassador at the WTO, who is doing an incredible job. All of you for working with us and strongly supporting the multilateral trading system and the WTO. I do have a team sitting there in the audience. They'll be there with you. We have our director, Micah, who is in charge of our sessions. Ambassador Tomo is there, and they will continue to interact with people at the conference and also to work with the ministers and the directors who are there to try and move forward any issues on accession. So they're there with you. I'm sorry I couldn't come. I hope to come very soon. It will be perhaps my second time in the region. I was lucky when I was managing director at the World Bank to have visited many of the countries in the region, Kazakhstan included. So I'm very much looking forward to this. And I want to thank you for your support of the WTO. And let's continue working together to deliver a successful 13th ministerial and successful accessions in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We definitely miss you, but we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.